Michelle moves approval of the minutes from February 14th. All those in favor? Carried. No, I'm ahead of schedule. Well, I guess since we're ahead of schedule, we can talk about the development applications for viewing. Any questions or discussions regarding those? And first of all, before we start, I'd like to welcome Kim to Planning Commission. This is his first, and it's good to see you on board. You have some big shoes to fill.
You'll do just fine.
Okay, back to the applications for viewing. Any discussions? Okay. All right, so we have 10:15. We have Sains. They're coming in today at 10:15? That clock's going to mess me up all day. Kim's first official duty, to fall off a chair. Shoot. The agenda was adopted by Lloyd.
By Lloyd, perfect.
Yeah. Okay, so land use, let's move to land use amendments. Discussion regarding the land use amendments. Oh, you guys are quiet today. We need a motion for the land use amendments. We don't. I should know this by now. It's been like 1,500 years. All right. Next meeting.
Well, that was quick.
Okay, planners report, system planners report. Aaron, do you have anything you want to talk about regarding that? Oh, Becky, I apologize. Becky, anything you want to talk about there? Or we looked at your planners report, I'm sure.
I don't have anything to add, but if there's any questions, it was pretty slim, so.
Yeah.
We do need a motion for that one, though.
Yeah. That substation, is that the one that you're talking about there? Is that the one that's going just west of town on the number 3?
So there's currently 2 proposed sites. That's before the AUC right now.
Okay.
One is on the number 3 and one is closer to Desert Bloom.
Is it the one in the valley? It goes into the valley, or is it up top? Up top? Okay.
Yeah, right by the greenhouse.
So they're pitching 2 different sites?
Correct.
And so it's at the AUC hearings going on now?
It is on right now, yeah, for this week. I think it'll run Monday to Friday.
That's fairly contentious, isn't it?
It appears to be, yes.
On YouTube, you can watch it.
I've watched a couple. They're pretty exciting stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, Dan moves planners report as presented. All those in favor? Carried. So Monarch Land Expansion, they're going to be joining us Zoom, right? So so that was at 11:15. So okay, all right. So I guess first up for consideration today is Josh Sain. Josh, is there Josh Sain here? Can you take one of the chairs up front, please? Morning, Josh. Okay, so this is, let me just get back to here. So this is development application 23/18, Mr. Sane. Shoot, Aaron.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The proposal is to construct a 2,160 square foot shop with a size relaxation of 560 square feet and a variance of 6 meters for the north side yard setback. The applicant is requesting approval from the MPC to construct 2,160 square foot shop. This results in a size relaxation of 560 square meters, and the applicant is also requesting a relaxation of 6 meters for the north side yard setback. As the applicant's letter of intent states, the variances that are being requested are similar to other shops that are located within the immediate area. And other shops in the immediate area also have side yard variances. And we do have a map showing the various, if you can see that. This map here shows all of the other shops in that subdivision that are larger than the land use bylaw minimum. And there is at least 12 that we've approved over the years that are larger than the 20 or the 1,600 square feet and have a larger side yard setback. So there's some very significant sheds out there, or shops, I should say. And what the applicant is proposing is 2,160 square foot shed, which is very similar to the other sheds that exist in the area. So Section 640 of the MGA allows us to grant variances if they will not unduly interfere with the amenities of the neighborhood or materially interfere with the effect, use, enjoyment, or value of neighboring properties. The proposed development conforms with the use prescribed for the land or building in the land use bylaw. When reviewing bylaw 22/09, yes, there is a variance involved. However, from a planning perspective, I believe this variance should be approved because I do not believe that this will have any impacts to adjacent properties. It will not impact the use or enjoyment of other properties. So I believe it passes the test that is set forth in Section 640 of the MGA. So I would recommend approval to MPC for this development. So under option 1, we have conditions of approval. And the conditions that are unique to this development would be conditions 9 and 10, where we approve the size relaxation of 560 square meters, and we approve the side yard variance. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Aaron. Josh, would you like to speak to your application at this time? You can just push the button and speak to that.
I think she's covered everything.
She covered everything for you? Okay, all right. Okay, go ahead with the pictures.
I drove up there and took some photos.
Okay.
And we can see the location of the site where the shop is going to be. I believe we're looking west of this shop. This is another shop, that area, looking southwest. We're looking north. We're looking south. East. And I drove around and took photos of some of the shops in that neighborhood or in that subdivision. And as you can see here, this is quite a significant shop, which is similar to what's being proposed. There's another large shed or shop. And another one. And another one. And that's the shop located directly south of the subject site. So that's a very large shop as well. So I can't see any impacts to the neighbors allowing this shed.
Aaron, do you have any pictures of that? I see that the biggest one was 2,400 square feet. Do you have any pictures of that one? Can you identify those, or see the one up in number 8?
43 and 8. Yeah, 43 is the same.
You
You have a picture of Cody's shop, I believe, there, which is 2,400 square feet.
So that first one was 24? Oh, that's number 24, okay, okay.
That's only 2,000 square foot.
Okay. We got two 24s, yeah, 43 and 8.
So that one's 2,000 square feet.
Okay. Just trying to put it in perspective.
This one here is, it's about 1,600 square feet. That one actually meets the land use bylaw.
It's harder to find ones that meet the bylaw than don't, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I thought I'd take a picture of the one. So that is what, 42? 22. That's the 2,000 square foot one.
Looks big.
And the 24 will just be bigger.
Yeah.
And that's number two. Number two is 1,920 square feet.
So that last one that you showed was very consistent with the parcel number 43, 2,400 square feet. It's a very similar design to that one.
Okay.
Do you have pictures, Aaron, of my application?
The site plan?
What it might look like? Yeah. I've got some drawings of them as well.
Certainly did.
Everything's around 2,000 square feet.
Yeah, I can see. 24's big. Go ahead, Michelle.
So if this whole subdivision is full of oversized shops, did they fit in with the land use bylaw before we changed it? Or were they all, had to come through here? Well, then I'll move it because everything else is that size. It looks by the pictures I saw. Yours is the only place that doesn't have a great big shop.
Now that Jeffrey's gone, since I'm the longest attendee here, I think I probably approve.
No, I was going to say, in my past history, I think they've come to MPC, and as you can see, we have a map made, so I think it's a precedence that's been set in that area.
Okay.
And that shows where the shed's going to be located. And there's about 6 meters side yard, so the massing of the shed should not be apparent to adjacent properties.
Is there any way we could, would you consider 2,000 square feet, or is it this is what you need, or what's?
That was just the recommended dimensions based on the standard building size.
Get Dan, go ahead.
I think we recognize there's a couple of big ones there, and honestly, I don't remember how they got away on us, but we're trying to keep it in that 2,000 square foot range, just because some of the wording in here, it's comparing to it. So if we keep going up and up and up, it's going to be, so if you're good with 2,000 square feet, I don't have a problem approving that because we've already set precedents there, but if you're willing to change it, I'd be good. That's a case of beer, by the way, for MPC. That's two.
Okay, so we have got some discussion here. You've got a motion on the floor at this point in time. I guess let's talk this out a little bit more on.
With respect, I'm not proposing anything larger than the other buildings in the area, and I've discussed with the neighbor strategies to minimize the visible impact on his property. I don't think any of the other neighbors are going to be negatively affected by it. I think the application stands the way it is.
Okay, all right, good, I guess. Okay, so Michelle moves approval with conditions as presented. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. So your development permit has been approved, subject to meeting the conditions which were previously discussed. The county will mail you a copy of your development permit. Since this is a discretionary use, there is now a 3-week appeal period that the public may appeal the issuance of this permit. The development permit will be advertised in the Cypress Courier newspaper for a duration of 3 consecutive weeks. If no appeal is filed within 21 days from the date issued, the development permit will become valid at that time. If you have any further questions, you may contact the development officer to discuss them after today's meeting. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, 10:30, are you here for Kyle? No? You're here for Cody Millington?
Yeah, Cody and
Do you want to do Cody's right now before, like Kyle's not here yet?
Mr. Chairman, I believe Cody was going to be attending, so we might want to wait on, unless you've heard different, but he did ask for the time, so.
Oh, Cody,
But Freed might be a
Reed,
possibility.
are they going to be attending? Declined. Your development application has been refused. I'm kidding, come on up. It's been a long winter. Okay, so this is subdivision application 23CY04, Global Ramac on behalf of Evelyn Freed. Go ahead, Becky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this property is located on Township Road 130, approximately 1.4 kilometers east of Range Road 75, in the southeast 30-13-7 west of the 4th. The proposal is to subdivide a 5.52 hectare portion of agricultural land for the purposes of creating a farmstead separation for the existing residence and yard site. The owners of the property is Evelyn Freed, Crystal Phillips, and Sherry Freed, and the applicant is Global Ramac Surveys. This is an agricultural subdivision, so it's zoned Agricultural District 2. And I'll move on to my presentation. So this application is intended to subdivide a 5.52 hectare or 13.6 acre agricultural parcel for the purposes of creating a farmstead separation for the existing residence and yard site. The remainder of the agricultural title contains dryland pasture and is 62.7 hectares or 154.94 acres in size. The proposed subdivision area contains 2 existing residences, multiple farm buildings, individual septic tile fields, and separate water wells that are utilized for domestic purposes. In addition, there's a privately owned gas well within the proposed subdivision area. The gas well is situated 89.5 meters and 119.6 meters from the 2 residences. The proposed subdivision gains direct and immediate access from an existing approach from Highway 524. It appears that the remainder of the agricultural title does not have an access approach. Therefore, the Municipal Planning Commission, as a condition of subdivision approval, may need to consider subdivision condition for the installation of a road approach from Range Road 75 to the remnant lands. So I've just added a note in here that since writing the report, we've received comments from Public Works and also conducted a site inspection. And it does appear that the remainder of the agricultural parcel gains access to Range Road 75 from an existing access approach. The proposed subdivision will result in the first title to be taken out of the quarter section. A residence could still be developed on the remainder of the agricultural title. And the proposed subdivision is located outside of the Tri-Area Intermunicipal Development Plan boundary and outside of the Highway 524 Area Structure Plan boundary. The South Saskatchewan Regional Plan states that municipalities are to identify their agricultural land and to limit fragmentation and conversion to non-agricultural uses. Under the implementation section of the plan, section 5, efficient use of land, it states that the land use framework promotes approaches to reduce the amount of land that is taken up by permanent or long-term development by utilizing the minimum amount of land necessary. Section 663 of the Municipal Government Act states that a subdivision authority may not require the owner of a parcel of land that is subject of a proposed subdivision to provide reserve if one lot is to be created from a quarter section of land. Part 2.9, road access of the subdivision regulations of the Municipal Government Act states that every proposed subdivision must provide direct access to a road or lawful means of access satisfactory to the subdivision authority to each lot that is created. Part 2.11, gas and oil wells, states that a subdivision application shall not be approved if it would result in a permanent dwelling, public facility, or unrestricted country residential development as defined by the Alberta Energy Regulator being located within 100 meters of a gas or oil well or within a lesser distance approved in writing by the Alberta Energy Regulator. Section 4.1.21, Land Use Policies of the Municipal Development Plan states that the county may support the subdivision of an existing farmstead if the following conditions are met. The agricultural parcel remains the balance of the quarter section. The subdivision will not impact or hinder the agricultural use on the balance of the quarter section. The subdivision parcel size for an existing farmstead is based on the area incorporating the farm dwelling and the accessory buildings and structures, unless there are physical or topographic features which define a more practical, larger parcel. The subdivision of the existing farmstead or the single vacant parcel retain the same agricultural land use as the remnant. Both the existing farmstead or single vacant parcel and the remnant agricultural parcel have direct or shared easement to get access to the existing municipal road network or provincial highway. In the Land Use Bylaw 2022-09, Section 1110, dwelling units on a parcel, states that unless otherwise specified in districts permitting multiple dwelling unit uses, the maximum number of dwelling units on a titled parcel size of 9.9 acres to 80 acres shall consist of a maximum of one principal dwelling unit and 3 secondary dwelling units or secondary suites. And number 6 is utility easements may be required between the proposed parcel and the remainder of the agricultural title. So, of course, we circulated the application, and Cypress County Finances replied that there are no local improvements associated with this property and there are no concerns. And I had circulated this while Jeffrey was still here, so the former Director of Municipal Services replied that the proposed subdivision intended to separate the existing yard site and to establish residences from the remainder of an unsubdivided quarter section complies with Section 4.1.21 subdivision farmstead of the county's municipal development plan and also Section 1110 dwelling units on a parcel of the county's land use bylaw. Therefore, the proposed subdivision is similar to other approvals that have been previously granted. TELUS replied that they have no objection to the proposed subdivision. Apex Utilities replied that they have no objection as it is outside of their franchise area. Public Works replied that there is an existing access approach in the northeast corner of the farmland, therefore no additional approach is required. The Alberta Energy Regulator replied that the gas well appears to be a farm well that received a cement squeeze back in 1969. The well is very old, and a cement squeeze would have been all that was required in the past before the current cut and cap abandonment. The Alberta Energy Regulator does not see a need for setback relaxation, and the subdivision can move forward without the requirement for AER approval. And administration would like to add further information based on the comments received from the Alberta Energy Regulator. Section 11.21A, setback requirements in respect of abandoned wells, states that a subdivision other than a subdivision solely in respect of a lot line adjustment made on or after the coming into force of this section shall not be approved if it would result in the building site or building being located within the minimum setback requirements in respect of an abandoned well set out in AER Directive 079 of the Alberta Energy Regulator. Directive 079, surface development in proximity to abandoned wells, states that surface structures on top of an abandoned well are not permitted, and a minimum 5-meter setback radius around the well must be maintained. So we've updated the site plan to include the well. And the 5-meter setback buffer was impossible to put on because it's so small. So the point is the structures are all well outside of the 5-meter buffer from that well. Alberta Transportation replied that the requirements of Section 18 of the regulation are met. The department anticipates minimal impact on the highway from this proposal. Pursuant to Section 21 of the regulation, Transportation and Economic Corridors grants approval for the subdivision authority to vary the requirements of Section 18 of the regulation. The requirements of Section 19 of the regulation are not met. To ensure future access management requirements are met, a service road is required. Pursuant to Section 21 of the regulation, Transportation and Economic Corridors does not grant approval for the subdivision authority to vary the requirements of Section 19 of the regulation. Transportation and Economic Corridors will accept service road dedication as described below. The department expects that the municipality will mitigate the impacts of traffic generated by developments approved on the local road connections to the highway system pursuant to Policy 7 of the Provincial Land Use Policies and Section 618.4 of the Municipal Government Act. To satisfy Section 19, dedication of a 30-meter service road right-of-way by caveat is required along the highway frontage as shown on the attached plan and shall be added as a condition of subdivision approval. Transportation and Economic Corridors accepts no responsibility for the noise impacts or other impacts of highway traffic upon any development or occupants thereof. The existing access may remain on a temporary basis. All direct highway access is to be considered temporary. No compensation shall be payable to the landowner or their assigns or successors when Transportation and Economic Corridors removes or relocates the access, or if highway access is removed and access provided via a municipal road or service road. The subject land is within the permit area of a highway as outlined in the Highways Development and Protection Regulation. Proposed development on the subject land will require the benefit of a roadside development permit from Transportation and Economic Corridors. So I've also added the proposed right-of-way or the required right-of-way onto the site plan to show you what they were requiring. So I'll move on to my recommendation, and it is approval with the subject to the following conditions. The developer is required to provide by caveat a 30-meter wide service road right-of-way along the highway frontage and south boundary of the subdivided area. The caveat is to be registered in conjunction with the registration of the subdivision with Alberta land titles. And number 2 is our standard condition. The developer is required to supply copies of any utility right-of-way plans, easements, and or agreements which are to be registered as a requirement for any affected utilities to Cypress County prior to the subdivision's registration with Alberta land titles. And that is my report.
Thank you, Becky. So one point of clarification. So even if a well is abandoned, it can never be built upon?
Correct. It says in the directive that it is not permitted to be built right on top, but you can receive approval from the Alberta Energy Regulator and the owner of the well for a variance.
That's interesting. So it permanently encumbers the land. Interesting, okay. I learned something new. All right. Brian, do you have anything yet?
Not really. I'd like to thank Becky for digging in on this Alberta Energy Regulator situation, because I talked to a pile of people and no one had run into this before. And because it was a private well, it was Mrs. Freed's parents that actually drilled it back in, I think, 1957. But as you see, it was cemented in 69, so I guess we got our answer. Thank you, Becky.
Okay. So conditions, you're not opposed to any of the conditions or anything like that? Okay. And I'll open the floor to discussion. You're moving it? Okay, so Dan moves approval of subdivision 23 CY04 with conditions as presented. All those in favor? Carried. Your subdivision has been approved, subject to meeting the conditions which were previously discussed. The county will now mail you a copy of your subdivision approval. You are advised to begin working towards completing the necessary conditions and making the arrangements to have the approved subdivided area surveyed if you have not already done so. You have 1 year from the subdivision's approval date to have met all of the approval conditions and to have the survey plan submitted to Alberta Land Titles. If you have any further questions, you may contact the planner to discuss them after today's meeting. Thank you. Thanks, Brian. Well, I don't see Brian yet. Or not Brian now. Kyle or Cody. Are you fleshing out the lobby to see if there's anything going on out there? Well, here we are. Yeah, I guess we're at a bit of a standstill now because everybody else will be attending, so we'll give, Kyle's 10:30, so we'll give him another 5 minutes, and then we'll proceed without him. Because we do have a 10:45. You probably want to run home and move some snow while you're waiting? Yeah, we'll recess for 5 minutes. Mr. Millington is not going to attend, so we will be considering subdivision application 23CY03. Go ahead, Becky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is located on Eagle Butte Road, approximately 2.3 kilometers south of Dunmore, on the northeast 26115 west of the 4th. This is Plan 0610622, Block 3, lots 14 and 15. Global Ramax Surveys has applied on behalf of Cody Millington, and the existing land use classification here is Country Residential District 1. The application is intended to subdivide and consolidate a 1.37 hectare or 3.4 acre portion from 2 existing country residential parcels for the purposes of creating a property boundary adjustment to amend the configuration of the lots. The landowner of the existing Lot 14 and Lot 15 intends to subdivide and consolidate an equal portion to relocate the dividing property line to accomplish a square configuration rather than the existing long and narrow. In 2022, Development Permit 22/268 was issued for the construction of a residence with an attached garage on the proposed west parcel. The structure meets the requirements for setbacks as stated in the Country Residential District 1 in the county's Land Use Bylaw 2022-09 with the proposed subdivision boundary requirements, or adjustments, sorry. The consolidation will be completed at the time of the subdivision's registration with Alberta Land Titles. Both existing lots currently contain water connections to the South Dunmore Water Co-op. If the application were to be approved, it will be required that a connection be relocated to the east parcel being created. This will require the registration of the proposed waterline right-of-way through the west parcel and will be completed by the Water Co-op. Access to the existing internal service road can be gained by both of the proposed parcels. There are no oil or gas wells in proximity to the proposed subdivision, and the proposed subdivision is located outside of the Tri-Area Intermunicipal Development Plan. The South Saskatchewan Regional Plan states that municipalities are responsible for the planning and development processes that ensure land is available for development, such as residential, commercial, and industrial lands, municipal roads and water and wastewater treatment facilities to accommodate population growth. Section 663 of the Municipal Government Act states that a subdivision authority may not require the owner of a parcel of land that is subject of a proposed subdivision to provide reserve land or money in place of reserve land if the land to be subdivided is 0.8 hectares or less, or if reserve was previously provided in respect of the land that is the subject of the proposed subdivision. And the reserve requirement was previously met as a result of subdivision 05CY22. Part 2.9 Road Access of the Subdivision Regulations of the Municipal Government Act states that every proposed subdivision must provide direct access to a road or lawful means of access satisfactory to the subdivision authority to each lot that is created. Section 4.3.7, Infill Country Residential Development of the Municipal Development Plan states that the county may encourage infill of existing country residential subdivisions where it is sensitive to the existing development and meets all subdivision and development regulations described in the Land Use Bylaw. And utility easements may be required between the proposed parcel and the remainder of the country residential title. So we circulated the application. Cypress County Finances replied that both parcels are subject to local improvements for private dust control, and these may need to be updated if the subdivision is approved. The former Director of Municipal Services replied that the proposed subdivision involving the reconfiguration and boundary adjustments of the existing 2 lots complies with Section 4.3.7, Infill Country Residential of the county's Municipal Development Plan. The acting planner's comments requiring the existing private water co-op turnout having to be relocated to the proposed east property in conjunction with the registration of the proposed water line right-of-way addresses the requirement and ensures that the established guaranteed water source for both parties continues to be met. The proposed subdivision and consolidations will not increase the density of the established country residential development. Cypress County Public Works replied that the west proposed parcel has 2 access approaches, but the east proposed parcel will require a new access approach and permit. TELUS Communications replied that they have no objection to the proposed subdivision. Fortis replied that they are the distribution wire service provider for the area and that they have determined that no easement is required. Apex Utilities replied they have no objection to the proposed subdivision as it is outside of their franchise area. Equus replied that they have no concerns as it is outside of the service area. South Dunmore Water Co-op replied that they can confirm that there are 2 current allocations of water registered to the 2 current parcels and will be transferable to the 2 new proposed lots. With the registered easement for a service line to the proposed east lot, both lots will have access to their allocated curb stop. The board has reviewed the proposal and information received and can confirm that the current arrangement of curb stops can support the current proposal. And number 9, Alberta Transportation replied that the requirements of Section 18 of the regulation is not met. The department anticipates minimal impact on the highway from this proposal. Pursuant to Section 21 of the regulation, Alberta Transportation grants approval for the subdivision authority to vary the requirements of Section 18 of the regulation. And the requirements of Section 19 of the regulation is not met. There is no direct access to the highway and there is sufficient local road access to the subdivision and adjacent lands. Pursuant to Section 21 of the regulation, Alberta Transportation grants approval for the subdivision authority to vary the requirements of Section 19 of the regulation. So that takes me to my recommendation, and that is approval, subject to the following conditions. The developer is required to consolidate the 0.68 hectare or 1.7 acre east portion contained within Plan 06106222 Block 3 Lot 14 with the 0.68 hectare or 1.7 acres of the adjacent country residential title contained within Plan 06106222 Block 3 Lot 15 to create a property boundary adjustment and amend the configuration of the lots. The consolidation is to be completed at the time of the subdivision's registration with Alberta Land Titles. Number 2, the developer is required to register a 6-meter water line right-of-way for domestic water supply provided by South Dunmore Water Co-op to the subdivided east parcel located at northeast 2611.5 west of the 4th from the existing water connection located at the west end of the parcel of Plan 06106222 Block 3 Lot 14. The water line right-of-way is to be registered on both titles in conjunction with the registration of the subdivision with Alberta Land Titles. Number 3, the developer is required to obtain approval from Cypress County Public Works for the construction of a new access approach to the proposed east parcel. The approach is to be constructed to Cypress County standards prior to the subdivision's registration with Alberta Land Titles. And number 4, the standard condition, the developer is required to supply copies of any utility right-of-way plans, easements, or agreements which are to be registered as a requirement for any affected utilities to Cypress County prior to the subdivision's registration with Alberta Land Titles. And that is my report.
Thank you, Becky. Brian, would you like to discuss or add to any of these conditions? Or
Nothing to add. The conditions are fine.
okay. Thank you. I'll open the floor to discussion. Nigel moves approval of 23 CY03 with conditions as presented. All those in favor? Carried. So your subdivision has been approved, subject to meeting the conditions which were previously discussed. The county will now mail you a copy of your subdivision approval. You have advised to begin working towards completing the necessary conditions and making arrangements to have the approved subdivided area surveyed, if you have not already done so. You have 1 year from the subdivision's approval date to have met all the approval conditions. If you have any further questions, you may contact the planner to discuss them after today's meeting. Thanks, Brian. See you next month. Attaboy. Have a wonderful day. Okay, so we're just going to keep moving on, I guess, because Brian maybe, or Kyle, maybe forgot or something. So we'll just kind of skirt around him for a little while, and then we can probably have a look at this 1 year time extension. I know they were Monarch was going to attend via Zoom, which is in 15 minutes, but I don't think it's going to be necessary for him to have input. Would we agree with that? Go ahead, Dan.
Well, all the ones that we've had in the past, we've given 1 year. After that, then we start
Yeah,
looking
it's
at it, so
it's basically going to be, well, I won't say whatever, but
I can't see him arguing against the
Yeah.
extension, so.
so I think we can talk about that and put it up for consideration, and if there are problems, I guess, then we will contact them.
Then we'll stop.
Yeah, we'll stop. All right, so this is 2217 Monarch Land 1 year time extension request. Aaron, would you like to take this one?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The applicant is proposing to extend the approval for a 4-acre gravel park and park and go temporary use for a first time, so it's a first extension for a development permit. The location of the site is the southwest 10th, 10, 12, 5 west of the 4th. And the development permit was approved by MPC on March 8th, 2022. The current proposed approval extension for DP 2217, as I said before, would be the first extension. Basically, we don't have any objections to granting this first 1 year extension. And we recommend that the current conditions of approval be maintained. That concludes my presentation, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Aaron. Any discussion or motions?
I'll make the motion on it and just explain that we really look at these, just for other members that haven't been here before, we usually give 1 year extension just to help them get through if they're doing a project, but if it goes into a second year and there's a lot of conditions on there that might have changed, then that's when we look at saying,
Well,
no, reapply.
and if there's been no bylaw changes or updates or things like that that would affect the applications. Go ahead, Michelle.
I just have a question. What is a gravel park?
Just a parking lot.
It's,
Why didn't you just say parking lot?
through the chair, it's a parking lot, and I guess next time I'll just say it's a parking lot. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's just for that parking for the, wasn't it for solar that they were?
Yeah, they're for development. Well,
Yeah. Is that project going already? No? Okay.
okay. Dan, you moved approval? Okay, Dan moves approval of the time extension for 1 year. All those in favor? Carried. Would you like to? Yeah. All right. Yeah, let's do Kyle at 10:30. He's not here, so. Okay, so we've got development application 23/67. Kyle Knodel will do it in his absence. He's not in attendance. Aaron, would you like to take this over, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a development permit 23/67. The zoning of this district is agriculture 2, and the proposal is to vary the 40-meter setback from the center line of Township Road 114 and Range Road 73. So the applicant, the site is an irrigated agriculture lot. It's located at the southwest extent to southwest 27-11-7 west of the 4th. The pivot will include a pipeline for providing water from an existing pump location, which is located further to the east of the site. The applicant is proposing to locate the pivot about 72 feet away from the center line instead of center line of both Range Road 73 and Township Road 114, whereas the land use bylaw in section 5.22 requires a setback of 131.2 feet. So there is a fairly significant variance being requested, about 21.9 meters. This application was circulated to our Public Works Department, and Public Works replied in their comments that the request for a setback variance may be problematic if road widening occurs. There are currently no plans to widen either Township Road 114 or Range Road 73. However, that could change. Alberta Transportation also requires a site triangle of 14 meters north along the property line parallel to Range Road 73 and 39 meters along the property line east parallel to Township Road 114. From the submitted site plan that the applicant submitted, he's going to be 72 feet away from the center line of both of those municipal roadways, and that would put the pivot about 3 or 4 feet outside of this visibility triangle that Alberta Transportation requires. So if the pivot is placed as proposed, it should not impose any impacts to motorists at that intersection. And I've taken some photos of that intersection. And so there's Range Road, I'm on Range Road 1, or Township Road 114, and you can see Range Road 73 at the corner. And the proposed site is close to where the structure, I guess that's the pivot, and it's currently being placed on some hay bales. So that will be moved, and if approved, that'll be moved to 72 feet away from the center line of both roads. Looking north on Range Road 73, proposed site is on the right side of the photo. Here's Township Road 114 looking east, and the proposed site is over to the left. And there's a SMRID pump house further down the street with about the same, well, actually a little bit closer, I'm guessing, than the setback that we're imposing for the pivot based on that site triangle. Then we're looking south. So basically, this is all farmland. There's no structures, there's really no features that could be impacted by this structure. The pivot itself is going to be about 11 feet high, and it's the typical open metal type of structure as shown in one of the photos here. And there's the pump house, and it's basically, geez, maybe a meter or two away from that fence, which I think would delineate the property line of this property. And there's another photo looking west. Oh yeah, and this is what the pivot is going to look like. So 11 feet, open metal structure. And Mr. Chairman, so we have two options here that we're presenting to MPC. The first option is to refuse because we're asking for a variance of the 40 meter from the center line of the roadways. And if MPC does choose to approve this, we would recommend the conditions as shown in option 2. And this concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. I do have some concerns about that intersection. The stop signs are now east-west. Years ago, they were north and south. And it is kind of a blind hill there going to the north. But, I mean, there is a stop sign going east-west there, so shouldn't be an issue. But that is a touchy intersection. I wonder if we should put a condition on that he could not enclose or any other way, make that pivot point more imposing than it already is. Just
Basically not to obscure the pivot point.
to create any,
Keep
yeah,
it open?
yeah, right.
Okay.
I don't know how to word that, but I mean, that would be my suggestion on this one, because that intersection is
Not to, through the chair, not to impede sightlines at that intersection.
Yeah, so we could just say that the pivot should be left open as is.
Yeah.
So it will not impact sightlines.
I need to see, that's to my dad's house, and when I blow that stop sign, I need to be able to see.
Yeah, and if he follows the visibility triangle, it'll be outside of your sight lines.
Go ahead. Lloyd?
For 100% for irrigation, I'm going to make the motion for option 2, but to approve it, but I would like to see if, a condition put in there that if the roads are ever widened, that he has to abide by the condition, and it's at his cost to move it, plus yours for the,
Okay. So,
So maybe we can draft 2 conditions quick
Yeah.
to run by
Yeah.
you guys?
yeah. I
We'll
think
draft 2
that's-
conditions.
Yeah, if you can. Michelle?
Becky, earlier you had said that this condition was in there before? Why was it taken out?
Through the chair, I spoke to PW and asked them about whether or not that condition was valid or not. And I guess we weren't on the same page, and the person I spoke to said, oh, we can't do that. However, we can. So I clarified just before the meeting that we can impose a condition with that wording. So,
Due to the variance that's
yeah,
in the application.
if we approve this, we're providing a really significant variance. And if the road is widened, then I don't think that it's unfair to ask somebody to pay for moving the structure.
I didn't think so either. I was just curious as to, when had our conversation before the meeting started here, she said that we couldn't, it was there, but it was taken out, and that's what I was worried about.
That was my mistake. I probably should have asked more questions.
We'll just write a new condition that says something about, we'll have to draft it,
Yeah.
they have to approve
Yeah.
it, so the wording of it.
Yeah.
You mean if we had discussed this before the meeting?
Okay, yeah.
Right.
Sorry.
Just gotta remember all of it again.
Well, I think now I'm so I got a whole.
Just stepped on my clothes.
Okay, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Aaron?
we've drafted a couple of conditions here, and I just want to read them out to you to make sure they meet your requirements.
Sounds terrific.
Okay, so the first condition, maintain the sight lines through the pivot structure. And the second condition would be, any costs of removing irrigation equipment and/or infrastructure due to future road widening will be at the developer's expense.
That sounds good to me. All right, so Lloyd's made the motion with these conditions as amended. Everybody understands? All those in favor? Carried. We're just motoring along, aren't we? 20 minutes. I guess we'll recess for another 10 minutes in case someone wants to do something else. Yeah.
1.7 kilometers east of Highway 3, and the legal description is northeast 3311-6 west of the 4th. The proposal is to subdivide approximately 32.3 hectare portion of agricultural land from an unsubdivided quarter section for the purposes of consolidation into the adjacent agricultural title to correct the encroachment of an irrigation pivot over property line. The owner and applicant is N/N Ranching Company Limited, and the existing land use classification is Agricultural District 2. The application is intended to subdivide an approximately 32.3 hectare or 80 acre portion of an agricultural title in order to consolidate it with the adjacent agricultural title to correct the existing encroachment of the irrigation pivot. The existing agricultural title contained within northeast 3311-6 west of the 4th is 64.3 hectares or 159 acres in size. The existing agricultural title contained within northwest 3311-6 west of the 4th is 64.3 hectares or 159 acres, also in size. There are no oil or gas wells in proximity to the proposed subdivision area. The parcel subject of the subdivision contains half an irrigation pivot. The pivot continues into the quarter section immediately to the west. The applicant's intent is to consolidate both portions under irrigation for the purposes of continued productivity. Therefore, the proposed subdivision and consolidation would allow for the existing operations to occur within one land title. Access to both the proposed parcel and the remnant land comes from existing approaches from Township Road 120. The use of the land is to remain agricultural in nature, therefore land use amendment approval by Cypress County Council is not required in this instance. The proposed subdivision is outside of the Tri-Area Intermunicipal Development Plan boundary and outside of the Township Road 120 Area Structure Plan. The South Saskatchewan Regional Plan states that the agriculture industry is the #1 renewable sustainable resource. Strategies include maintaining an agricultural land base which recognizes the value of agricultural land for sustainable growth and diversification of the agriculture industry, as well as providing an opportunity for expansion for agricultural production in the region. Section 663 of the Municipal Government Act states that a subdivision authority may not require the owner of a parcel of land that is a subject of a proposed subdivision to provide reserve land or money in place of reserve land if the land to be subdivided is to be subdivided into lots of 16 hectares or more and is to be used only for agricultural purposes. Part 2.9 Road Access of the Subdivision Regulations of the Municipal Government Act states that every proposed subdivision must provide direct access to a road or lawful means of access satisfactory to the subdivision authority to each lot that is created. Section 4.1.2, Conservation of Irrigated Farmland of the Municipal Development Plan states that the county shall protect and retain irrigated farmland for agricultural purposes to support the viability of agricultural operations and preservation of improved and productive agricultural farmland. And utility easements may be required between the proposed parcel and the remainder of the agricultural title. When we circulated the application, Cypress County Finances replied that the parcel is subject to Westside Water Co-op local improvement. We would require confirmation as to the location of the water connection. The former Director of Municipal Services replied that the proposed subdivision complies with Section 4.1.2, Conservation of Irrigated Farmland in the county's Municipal Development Plan. The subdivision, which will allow the consolidation of the irrigated portion with the adjoining irrigated title, will enhance agricultural productivity by allowing the irrigation to continue to make its full revolution and be as productive as possible. The proposed subdivision and consolidation is consistent with similar subdivision approvals in the past. Cypress County Public Works replied that they have no concerns. Apex Utilities replied that they have no objection to the proposed subdivision. They wish to advise that any relocation of existing facilities will be at the expense of the developer, and payment contributions required for new gas facilities will be the responsibility of the developer. Fortis Alberta replied that they are the distribution wire service provider for the area and that no easement is required. TELUS replied that they have no objection to the proposed subdivision. The City of Medicine Hat's Environment, Land and Government Relations Department replied that there are gas facilities within proximity to the proposed subdivision. Surface improvements are not permitted within the City of Medicine Hat pipeline right-of-way and within 100 meters of any City of Medicine Hat wellhead unless the landowner applies to and receives approval from the Alberta Energy Regulator and the city for a setback reduction. Any ground disturbances or surface improvements within 30 meters of any City of Medicine Hat gas pipeline or with 100 meters of any gas wells will require a crossing or proximity agreement. City of Medicine Hat Electrical Distribution replied that they have no concerns as the proposal is outside of their service area. St. Mary's River Irrigation District replied that they have no objection to the proposed subdivision, provided that the 32.3 hectare or 80 acre parcel within the northeast 3311-6 west of the 4th is consolidated with the adjacent agricultural title within the northwest 3311-6 west of the 4th. Westside Water Co-op replied that they do have a concern with the proposed subdivision. The water service is currently attached to the northeast 3311-6 west of the 4th. Should the subdivision result in a new title being created, which includes the residents, the homeowner will be responsible to contact the co-op and arrange to transfer the service to the new title. The concern is that the subdivision will result in the co-op's infrastructure, so their curb stop, for this service now will be included in the parcel located west of the house. Should the membership be assigned to the title which has the home, the curb stop will be on a separate title. Therefore, the board will require that the curb stop be moved at the member's expense to the title which acquires the service. And Alberta Transportation replied that the requirements of Section 18 are met, therefore no variance is required. While no variance is required, the department expects the municipality will mitigate the impacts from this proposal to the highway system pursuant to Policy 7 of the Provincial Land Use Policies and Section 648(2)(c)(2) of the Municipal Government Act. In addition, the requirements of Section 19 are met, therefore no variance is required. So I'll move on to my recommendation, which is approval, subject to the following conditions. Number 1, the developer is required to provide Cypress County finances with written notification if the intent is to transfer the local improvement tax for Westside Water Co-op to the remnant parcel, or if it is to remain with the proposed subdivision prior to the subdivision's registration with Alberta Land Titles. Number 2, it is the developer's responsibility to enter into any necessary agreements with the Westside Water Co-op for the supply of water to the proposed subdivision or to the remnant parcel. The developer will be required to provide written evidence that the requirements of the Westside Water Co-op have been satisfied prior to the subdivision's registration with Alberta Land Titles. Number 3, the developer is required to consolidate the proposed subdivision contained within Northeast 3311-6 west of the 4th with the adjacent agricultural title to the west contained within Northwest 3311-6 west of the 4th to enhance irrigation operations. The consolidation is to be completed at the time of the subdivision's registration with Alberta Land Titles. And number 4, our standard condition, the developer is required to supply copies of any utility right-of-way plans, easements, or agreements which are to be registered as a requirement for any affected utilities to the county prior to the subdivision's registration with Alberta Land Titles. And that is my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Becky. Stephanie, would you like to speak to your application at this time or any of the conditions? Okay, you can just press the button there and it'll turn red. There you go.
Yeah, no, everything seems straightforward. We are looking at getting that transferred, the Westside Water Co-op transferred to the other division, so yeah.
I have one question. Does will there be any water rights remaining on the remnant parcel, or is it all going to be on that west parcel?
It's all going to be, for the SMRID, is all on the west parcel.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't have any opposition to that. I think it's a good subdivision to keep that irrigation all in one block. Any discussion? Okay. Lloyd moves approval of subdivision 22CY21 with conditions as presented. All those in favor? Carried. So your subdivision has been approved, subject to meeting the conditions which were previously discussed. The county will now mail you a copy of your subdivision approval. You are advised to begin working towards completing the necessary conditions and making the arrangements to have the approved subdivided area surveyed if you have not already done so. You have 1 year from the subdivision's approval date to have met all of the approval conditions, and to have the survey plan submitted to Alberta Land Titles for registration. If you have any further questions, you may contact the planner after today's meeting to discuss them. Thanks, Stephanie. Okay, next meeting. Tuesday, April 11th, 10 a.m. Are we looking like lots coming down the pipe, or is it fairly busy? It is. Yeah, usually April, May gets busy. So, okay, thank you all for attending, and I adjourn the meeting.